Hi there, I'm Mahibi, the Sea Coach, and welcome back to part 3. And we are looking at the key considerations for a successful repatriation. So we're in the last phase of our assignee experience, and let's look at where we are on this journey together in part 3. So in the previous video, we were looking at that reintegration plan. And now in this video, we're going to be looking at managing that reverse culture shock and looking at lifestyle impacts. So reverse culture shock, what do we mean by that? It is a term used to describe the feelings that the assignee will feel once they return home. It's surprise, disorientation, confusion, perhaps. And it's experienced, as I said, when the person returns home and finds that they don't fit in just quite like they used to. So it's important to avoid, as far as possible, these feelings of reverse culture shock. The organisation really needs to focus on the needs of the individual and their partner and maintain ties to the home country as far as possible so that they remember what it's like to be at home, how much a pint of beer costs, how much a milk costs, what it's like to go on public transport, all of the daily challenges, all the daily lifestyle activities, actions, behaviors, what that looks and feels like, it still rings true and it resonates for them. So by doing so, by maintaining those home country ties, we're minimizing the shock that's resulting from the not knowing, essentially. So, as I said, we invest in regular trips back home so that the individual and their partner can maintain and enjoy relationships as well with friends, family, enjoy the lifestyle at home, as well as maintaining the real cultural and national developments, such as the cost of living, changes resulting from infrastructure projects, investments in local projects, perhaps as well. And these developments and these evolutions also support different lifestyle choices. So, in turn, the individual should not lose sight of the reality of not living in that privileged status as an expat. So, let's look at the first point together. Facilitating prioritization of values and needs to define what's important for the individual. With our coaching approach hat on, we want to facilitate that open and safe space to revisit how the employee is prioritizing their values and their needs right now. They've been through a lot, as we all do through the years, and it's important to understand what's important for the individual, their partner, their family, and discuss those benefits of maintaining home connections for them. What does it mean for them on an emotional basis? Having those friends, family ties, relationships, and reminding them of the future opportunities once they return back home. It's about creating excitement. It's about creating a vision of them in a new chapter, but in a familiar setting and potentially in a different status within their role, promotion, etc. So we're creating a different type of excitement. We're also looking at how we can support this easier reintegration. So the continuous family connections and those regular home visits is also going to allow the person to have support from their family and their friends once they return home. Aligning how the organisation can support the individual to maintain these connections is key. Are regular home visits welcomed, or actually are they not welcomed? If they are, how many visits are paid for by the organisation? And does this meet the expectations if the person and their family want to return home regularly? Are the expectations aligned in how the organisation will support the individual and their family? Just as important as revisiting home, there's something to consider perhaps around a family visit out to the individual and their family in destination. Mum, dad, siblings, their families. This initiates a level of empathy and understanding so that on return, they have a deeper understanding and awareness of the environmental and change factors. It's very easy to assume how others are living, but actually experience it on a day-to-day. So seeing is experiencing, and even though it may seem like it's a luxurious benefit wherever the individual and their family are, when family is able to visit them, understand their way of life, they're able to show a higher level of empathy and compassion once they return to home. Now, this may sound silly, but it's just as important to define what isn't valuable or meaningful to the individual and their family to avoid the organisation investing too much into this type of expense. We want to maximise our return on investment, so we need to understand where we want to invest to keep those family and friendship ties back home and those ties back into the business. So, how many regular trips aligns to the expectation of the employee and their partner or family? And perhaps have we considered the family visit out, mum, dad, brother, siblings, etc. Also, it's important to understand, are we organising trips for the whole family? Is it for just the employee because they actually want to visit home and the home business more regularly to keep the business connection and the relationships and the networking there? So understanding what isn't important is just as important as understanding what is important. So exploring options such as those routine trips can also support business objectives. They can also be used as the checkpoint in terms of reviewing annual objectives, reviewing the 100-day plan, the reintegration plan, as obviously we're coming nearer to that. We're looking at examples where we are supporting the home country ties. So receiving training for professional development, something I've talked about before, doing this in a safe way, sharing best practices, sharing cultural ways of working in destinations so that home country teams can learn and vice versa. We're also looking at improvements of global processes if that hasn't been addressed previously. There are opportunities to bring about business value. We're marrying the personal and the work value to ensure that the business is continually realizing their return on investment throughout the assignment. And at the same time, we are creating those strong ties. And this isn't just the human fluffy stuff, around these meaningful connections, but we really are also reiterating a point here around the business connections, business relationships, business networking, business improvements, and potentially creating more business value if we're expanding client accounts and creating more value in existing client portfolio, all things that are worth consideration. So our familiar spot here, let's get our pen and paper and look at the reflexive questions together. How are you facilitating a prompted and meaningful discussion around what's important for the employee to keep home country connections? Remember, this is to support a successful repatriation, but again, these conversations, these points are covered right at the beginning of the assignment before that person has left the ground. So how do you plan social, family and work connections back to the home country whilst the employee is on assignment? What's valuable for them, what's not? How do you create the most value from the investments to prevent a reverse culture shock on repatriation? How do we essentially create opportunities that connect the employee back to real life? And our favorite questions, what's missing in your existing policies that could be some nice, easy wins? And action points, mini, big projects that require collaboration and sign off across the business to improve the repatriation experience and protect your return on investment. I'm Mahibi. Thank you very much for joining me in part 3.4, where we've looked at the key considerations to manage and prevent reverse culture shock. It's a real thing. So in the last video, we're going to be wrapping up part 3 and looking at the role of the coach as a consistent pillar to the employee. I'll see you then.